Okay, so this is my plan for targeted teaching. Who are my students? My students are in grade 3. As you can see, they have a range of abilities in terms of their mathematical and English knowledge. Many of my students have different processing disabilities and disorders. Some are highly gifted, some have EAL, and I've got a different range of their learning. So what am I teaching them? I'm teaching my students in this lesson sequence how to analyze the story as well as its themes, as well, and what themes are, represent, and how they communicate to the audience. For my construct, I've got analyzing a text as an examination and interpretation of its content to identify and understand the author's intentions and any underlying messages they are communicating. Ultimately, analyzing a text aims to deepen comprehension, provoke critical thinking, and derive insights that enrich understanding. So from AT1, my students had demonstrated their current knowledge of story summarization, which then folded over into their knowledge of story themes. Most students have a basic understanding of what themes are, but need to improve on different aspects. Students will need to be taught better ways to identify them, as well as their purpose in a story. They will be marked on a rubric that will determine whether they demonstrated a particular skill or not. For my students who are behind, we'll be focusing on their learning development as opposed to their deficits. So this is a rubric that is developed using Bloom's taxonomy and the score that will determine whether they acquire something or do not. This is the Victorian curriculum that matches up with what my lesson is covering. It basically says covers students' reading comprehension, the analytical skills, and their ability to communicate their understanding. What are my students ready to learn? So based on the results from their diagnostic assessment, they've been broken down into 4 ZPD groups. This is the zone of proximal development that will determine what they know and what they currently need to know. This makes it easier to target particular students' learning needs, and it also makes it easier for myself to make it easier to determine what they need to know in a lesson and assign them the correct work. They have shown they're ready to learn what themes are and represent in a story. Most students at least have a basic understanding of story analysis from the previous summarization skills, which will make it easier to model their learning onto this. They also ready to learn the ways in which they can better analyze stories on their own. And many students different levels of readiness and have been broken into the separate ZPD groups. So what are the goals for my students? So the overall goals for this lesson is to learn what themes are and represent in a story, learn how to identify themes, explain their interpretation, and their intended outcomes of story themes. This will be done so that they can demonstrate it through different level criteria and performance tasks. For the ZPD groups, they will have different goals based on their current knowledge and their learning needs. For Group 1, they need to understand what themes are and represent. Group 2 will identify themes and their target audience. Group 3 will be intended outcomes of themes and elaborating on their interpretations. Group 4 will compare themes to other stories in the real world. This allows for each group to be able to focus on their learning skills as opposed to what they do or do not know. Allows me to show that I have high expectations for them and know that they can learn regardless of their current knowledge and abilities. The goals are achievable, which makes it for every student that they can learn. And I'm not just going to tell them, just do whatever you want, regardless of their high or low. I want them to be challenged and learning. Students are able to show that, be shown the intelligence skill acquired through hard work and dedication, and that it is achievable. And students will feel their needs are supported through their individual ZPD groups. So in terms of the learning sequence, the first lesson will be focused on teaching students what themes are and represent and ways to identify them. This will be a more modeled lesson, and they'll have a lot more guidance. They'll be covering like a fairy tale, like The Big Bad Wolf or something like that. Lesson 2 will focus on teaching students target audience and intended learning outcomes. Again, it'll be more modeled, but this will be more of a we do as opposed to I do. And the final lesson will be them on their own, analyzing the Lorax and its themes and using their previously learned skills in order to do so. And they will be able to demonstrate their understanding by doing this. In terms of targeted teaching, all lessons will be explicitly taught. This will remove any ambiguity and will be specifically good for students who are neurodivergent and maybe take things too literally and not understand what to do. Every lesson will be, first 2 lessons will be scaffolded, so they have a modeled example on what to do. And I'll use name sticks in order to ask questions so that every student in the class is participating, regardless if they are nervous or don't know as much, and it's a good way for everyone to contribute. In terms of differentiation in the resources, Group 1 will have worksheets that have guided questions. These will help make sure that so that they can cut down on maybe not writing as much, but they will be filling in answers and making sure that they are still demonstrating that understanding of things. They will have task cards that will give them step-by-step explanations on how to do the task at hand to help them out. For groups 2, 3, and 4, they all contain students that are either have visual hearing impairment, dyslexic, or EAL. So to help this, they will be provided with tablets that will have recorded video to give them steps on what to do so that they have equal access to equity in their learning. Students with ADHD may be provided with headphones in order to block out sound in order to prevent any distractions in class, and seating arrangements will be made so that students with ASD may sit on their own if they please. For their classwork, in terms of differentiation, Group 1 will have guided questions. The way that they've done their work has been decided with me. This will give the students a choice on how to approach their learning and demonstrate their knowledge in different ways. It gives them, make sure that they feel in control of their learning and a sense of ownership on how they learn and what they achieve. They'll be providing more challenging work for Group 4 as they are high achievers. Their work will require more complex answers, and they'll have more extension activities in order to keep them challenged and keeping them engaged in learning. Group 3 will have the opportunity to do Group 4 extension activities if they finish early in order to challenge them as well and give them opportunity to move up. This will make it so I'm flexible with my students' learning needs as a teacher. Some limitations may be that on my strategies is that I do need to build up a rapport and know what my students need at all times, and it may take a bit of time to set up everything, but over time it will lessen. In terms of lesson 2, this is where the differentiation in the classwork starts to differ more. Their focus of their learning will be targeted more towards each student's learning intention for the overall sequence. So as we said, Group 1s will focus on understanding of themes. Group 2 focus on target audience and why they were chosen. Group 3 focus on their elaboration skills, and Group 4 will focus on relating to the real world. This is, again, to focus on their acquiring skills and learning and not just what they do or don't know. Each student will get a different worksheet. Some will have extensions and some will not, but again, they can move up into the next lot. And the same thing for the final lesson. This will be where they do, for the assessment, they'll have to, again, focus on their learning intention. They have all got will be able to identify the themes of the story, identify themes of the story, intended audience and intended outcome, able to identify the main theme, intended audience, and why they were chosen. It explains the interpretation. We'll be able to analyze the themes, explain how the story relates to the real world. After that, this will be focusing on their assessment. Students will need to demonstrate that they are progressing in their learning and have acquired new knowledge. All their assessment work will be done on something that is directly observable, so what they do, say, make, or write. Every student's differentiation in terms of their assessment is accepted as natural, positive, and a completely valid way of learning. This is to make sure that students who need to do something in a different way are showing that it's normal, they are learning, they are doing their work. It doesn't matter if it's not exactly the same as everyone else, because this is an assessment of students' abilities, not their disabilities. In terms of their formative assessment, students will be achieving their success criteria for the learning intentions at the end of every lesson. So they will be able to demonstrate that. They'll have their learning logs. This is where they can either write in there or even orally say to me. This allows students to explain their understanding of the topic at the end of every lesson and that they understand it and that they have learned it. They can orally explain that to myself. The differentiation is with how much is written for the assessments, more word count is expected from students in the higher ZBD groups. This is again so that they are challenged and they are learning. I don't want them to just be skirting by with the bare minimum that they are able to do. I do have expectations for them. For the universal design of learning, I've used the universal design for learning to allow for flexible assessment that allows students to provide multiple ways of learning, engaging, and demonstrating their understanding. For their summative assessment, they will be doing an analysis of the LORAX, where they will demonstrate everything that they've learned in the previous 2 lessons. Again, it will be directly observable, so everything they say, do, write, or make. It's more high stakes, and so they have to prove their learning and do it on their own. So this is, again, with going with the gradual release of responsibility, they will, at this point, being shown how to do it with me, and now they're going to show that they know how to do it on their own. They have fully completed their assessment tasks. So this will be the rubric that they're covering. In order to show that they're progressing, they will have achieved more indicators on their rubric. Demonstrate they're progressing in their learning and acquired new knowledge. So if they had only, say, covered 4 up to here previously, and they have moved up at least maybe 1 or even 2 or even higher, they've shown that they are learning and acquiring new knowledge. they've reached the final level of Bloom's taxonomy and the create level. And this does use Bloom's taxonomy in order to acquire, to assess. And that is it.